Tuesday. Good day, people. How are we? Thank you for hanging with us. Me and Max holding things down here in Bristol. Stephen A. in the nation's capital. Good morning, gentlemen.
What's up, y'all? How y'all doing?
What's going on, Stephen A?
I'm good.
See you went to the game last night.
Let me brag about this, man. Not only did I go to the game.
Oh, here we go.
But as a diehard Steelers fan, I'm behind the Steelers bench at the 50-yard line. I mean, I had a beautiful, beautiful night. I got to admit it. I mean, it was special. You know, I didn't think the Steelers would win this game. I do believe they're going to win about 12 games this year. But I got to tell you, to just have that close-up view like that, it was. I must admit, I'm bragging right now.
It
was
nice.
special. It was special.
I changed a diaper yesterday.
It was
That's
nice.
good.
Yeah.
I watched a nice big screen TV, so that was comfy. I had popcorn. That was enjoyable.
It's good to be, it's good to be Stephen A. Smith sometimes.
And it's good to be normal. I'm just your average Joe.
It's all relative. It's all relatives. I've been there where I've changed the diapers, believe it or not, and I've been there where I just sat on my couch and watched on the big screen. So it's all relative, y'all. It's all relative. It's okay. I'm here for y'all.
Okay,
if I'm there, y'all are there.
Okay, thanks. I'll let you know when I'm behind the bench at the 50-yard line when that happens.
I'll be changing a diaper behind the 50-yard line.
You do that. You do that. You do that.
Let's get into it. Coming up a couple days after vacationing on Revis Island, A.J. Green joining us. But you know where we're kicking things off. Monday Night Football, where it was a tight game early. Then Stephen A. became a happy man because the Steelers, who are missing a few key offensive weapons, went off, torched the Redskins defense at FedEx Field 38-16. We were all looking forward to the Antonio Brown-Josh Norman matchup, but Norman rarely covered Brown. Brown had his 26th career 100-yard receiving game. Big Ben, 3 pass TDs. D'Angelo Williams, not a bad day in the office. 143 yards rushing, filling in for Le'Veon Bell. Stephen A., what was going on Washington's defense?
Well, we don't know, and guess why? Because they don't seem to know what the hell they're doing. Let's just call it like we saw it last night. It just seemed like the Washington hierarchy does not know what the hell they're doing, and it extends to their coaches. I'm only talking about one game. We're not acting as if this is going to be a prelude to a disastrous season. We'll pump the brakes on that for the time being. They've got divisional foes in the NFC East to deal with because the Washington Redskins, who, by the way, did not have a single victory against the winning team all of last year. We are trying to find out whether or not they are fraudulent, whether or not they're legit, or are they just a product of playing in a subpar or a very competitive division that reeks mediocrity in the end. That's what we're talking about here because they're clearly not on the same level as the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers absolutely dominated them last night. They stomped them. They beat them down. As far as I'm concerned, they humiliated the Washington Redskins on Monday Night Football. And I don't believe I'm engaging in hyperbole there, Max, saying what I'm saying. Antonio Brown put on an absolute show. I know Bashan Breeland says that he's not going to hang his head. If you think I'm going to hang my head, you don't know me very well. Whatever the hell he said. I'm not saying that he should for the rest of the season, but he should be hanging his head all week long. He got embarrassed last night. He got schooled. Now, in his defense, he got schooled by the very best that there is at the wide receiver position in a game of football today. There's nobody better than Antonio Brown. There's just nobody better. This dude is on another level. I think it's actually insulting to call him special. That's not good enough. It's not good enough to call him special. He's on another level. Now, Max, let me take you inside because, like I said, I was at the game. I was at the 50-yard line, which means I was also in the locker room post-game because that's the reporter in me. This is what I do. I'm in the locker room for the Steelers post-game. And from Coach Mike Tomlin to Antonio Brown to numerous players on the Steelers, whether it be on the offensive line or the defensive side of the ball or whatever, they were in unison in this one incredulous question. How in God's name was Antonio Brown single covered? And literally you're up in his grill and you're not tailing off, you're not doing anything. They could not believe that there was no one over top to help out Breeland. They could not believe that Antonio Brown was in single coverage for most of this game. They could not believe that Josh Norman didn't find himself going up against Antonio Brown for more than 3 or 4 plays in the game. they sat up there like I literally had one of the players say to me, quote, they acted like he was just some regular old receiver. Not the dude that's caught 375 passes over the last 3 years for 1,400, 16 plus 100, and then 18 plus 100 yards the last 3 years. I mean, what the hell was Jay Gruden and his staff thinking? It makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, literally, guys, I am not exaggerating. I swear to you, I am not exaggerating. The Steelers went from, like, exuding incredulousness to literally feeling insulted, like, did they not know who the hell they're dealing with? And not only is Antonio Brown that great, but he doesn't have a scrub throwing him the football. He's a two-time Super Bowl champion who's been to 3 Super Bowls, who's destined for the Hall of Fame. By the way, Big Ben Roethlisberger had on a pretty fly suit last night, but that's a different subject for another day. I wouldn't have worn that color, but he pulled it off. I want to give him props for that. Since I gave him props for his wardrobe in the locker room, I thought it would be apropos to give him props for that right here on national television because the suit was looking pretty fly. But I will tell you, they were shocked, and so was I. In the end, what this comes down to is that we don't know what the hell the Redskins were thinking because I don't think the Redskins knew what they were doing last night. And I spoke to Josh Norman after the game. He didn't want to question the coaching methods. He didn't want to question their schemes. He didn't want to question anybody. You know, he got into it a little bit with his teammate Bruton for a little while. But he said that was just 2 guys going at it, arguing about coverage and stuff like that. But it was no big deal. And D'Angelo Hall, of all people, were the one that stopped them from getting into it with one another. But he said he wasn't going to question the staff. But he definitely wanted the challenge. And when I spoke to Antonio Brown after the game, he said that he's friends with Josh Norman. And obviously they exchanged jerseys on the field at the end of the game and all of that other stuff. And they seemed really, really close. So that seems genuine and legit. But he was shocked as to Josh Norman not being in his face a bit more. And he said that there was no doubt that Josh Norman wanted that challenge. So, again, I got to look at the Redskins coaching staff, Max, and say what the hell they were doing. I don't have the answer to the question. But to me, that's the game right there. How do you leave Antonio Brown in single coverage and expect to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers? Cincinnati clearly is not going to do that next week. We all know that. I don't know what the hell the Washington Redskins were thinking. I don't know.
The reason that Washington lost and what they were doing on defense was playing the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. This is what's going to happen to teams, even good defensive teams. We don't know what the Washington defensive situation is going to look like all year. You presume they've gotten better. At least they spent some money in the secondary because they just played an offense which we thought last year, at least I did and many others did, was going to be an historically great offense. Then they all couldn't get on the field at the same time, healthy together. And then again this year, no Martavis Bryant and no Le'Veon Bell, but still an historically great offense. This is what happens when you play that kind of team. And maybe they're single covering because they're thinking, look, we didn't spend money on the line. We spent money in the secondary. Let's put them to work. Go ahead. Go ahead, Breland, cover Antonio Brown, which is, of course, ridiculous. If the idea is we're going to let Antonio Brown get his and just cover everyone else, well, he got his and he beat you. No, this is what happens when you play the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is why I picked them last night. And it's not coincidence that, look, Antonio Brown is amazing, and they compared him during the broadcast last night to Jerry Rice in terms of his work ethic and everything. Apropos, he is, look, he's the best wideout in football because you can't prove otherwise. All the evidence points to Antonio Brown. I will say, I think if you put Odell Beckham Jr. on that team, he would put up similar, if not better, numbers to Brown, and I think their numbers are going to be similar anyway, even though Odell's not on that team. Now, what is that team? It's not just future Hall of Famer Big Ben Roethlisberger, Stephen A. Is it a coincidence that D'Angelo Williams is setting records for running backs at the age of 33? I mean, he's a good running back, don't get me wrong. Give him credit. Le'Veon Bell, when he's healthy, is clearly, to my eye, the best in the game at that position. Why is this? Why is it that Roethlisberger suddenly at this point in his career, and I get it, Haley now, he feels more ownership in the offense now, and he's been in the league a bunch of years. It's not like this kind of simple job that he had to do when he was a younger quarterback. He now has more responsibility in the offense, and he's a great quarterback. I'm not questioning any of that. But suddenly he looks like a cross between Dan Marino and Brett Favre and Peyton Manning. And Antonio Brown is putting this kind of distance between him and the next best receiver. And Le'Veon Bell, when he's on the field, is clearly better than everyone. And D'Angelo Williams looks like an elite back. It's the offensive line. That offensive line is special. And I'm not to take anything away from the skills positions because they get it done. They're excellent, of course. But when you put excellent or great skills positions players behind a fantastic offensive line, they look different than everyone else. So Washington, what were they doing on defense? Getting their butts whooped. I mean, of course this was going to happen on defense for Washington. They're playing Pittsburgh, Stephen A. Pittsburgh going to do this to a lot of teams this year.
Well, in fairness to what you're saying, Max Kellerman, there were guys on the offensive side of the ball to the Washington Redskins who felt exactly the way that you did, that their defensive line got pretty beat up. D'Angelo Williams running 26 times, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, skirting through the defense, you know, hitting gaps, hitting holes, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, let's talk about the dollars and cents here. You gave Josh Norman $75 million, $50 million in guaranteed. Breland is a guy that you believe in, but Josh Norman is the big offseason acquisition. He was the one that was supposed to buffer the secondary that had you talking about the Washington Redskins secondary, a weak link for them to some degree last year as possibly being top 5 this year. And then they go out and lay that egg. And it wasn't because you put your best guy on their best guy. It was because you literally schematically had your best guy supposedly in Josh Norman avoiding Antonio Brown. Now, if you know anything about Josh Norman, this is where I'm going to come to Josh Norman's defense. Don't tell me that brother's running from the challenge. I don't want to hear that. Now, I believe in cat. I don't know if you ever heard about this. You ever heard of cat coverage, Max Kellerman? Have you ever heard of cat coverage? Yes or no?
Yeah, I've heard, but I'm offhand. Go ahead. Yes.
Let me tell you what cat coverage is.
Yes.
I learned what cat coverage was from Chris Carter and Ray Lewis last year on Monday Night Football when the game was in Atlanta and Julio Jones was playing wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. And Ray Lewis said, you know what cat coverage is? I got that cat. You got that cat? Who got that cat? Get that cat right there. Get that cat right there. That's who you get. You understand? That's what cat coverage is, okay? So if you're Josh Norman, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking along the lines of, I'm Josh Norman. I'm the $50 million man guaranteed, that is, okay? I'm going to sit there and say, I got that cat right there, Antonio Brown. I don't want to hear it. The problem is that because he came into this season bloviating about who he was and how gung-ho he was, and people were sort of put off by it, I believe that he wanted to follow the game plan of the Washington Redskins because he didn't want to create any kind of tension or anything like that. That's my personal belief. I don't know that. I didn't speak to him about that part, but that's what I personally believe. Having said that, my point is it should not have even come to that for the Washington Redskins. You should have put Josh Norman in a position wherever Antonio Brown went, he goes. Plain and simple. Whatever side of the field Antonio Brown is on, he's on that side, as opposed to having Josh Norman on the left side at all times, because it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Cat coverage. That's funny. That's not what I thought you were talking about. Yeah.
Well, that's Ray Lewis and Chris Carter.
Yeah.
That's what they say. I got that cat right there. You got that cat. I got that cat.
Whatever cat is on Antonio Brown is going to get it. You can't just single cover him. That goes for everyone. There are, cover corners in the history of football that are legitimate cover corners that can take away the other team's best receiver. When that best receiver is elite, you can count them on one hand in my lifetime. You know, Deion Sanders, Darrelle Revis, most recently. There are so few guys like that ever lived. And Norman's a good player, but he's not that. You have to devote more resources than one guy, even if it is Josh Norman on Antonio Brown, and he's still probably going to get his.
No Le'Veon Bell.
Well, but here's the part that's unforgivable about it. If you look at anybody in the AFC North who obviously play against the Steelers better, more so than anybody else, therefore would be more familiar with this guy, you know that the Cincinnati Bengals ain't going to single cover Antonio Brown. You know Baltimore's not going to do that. You know Cleveland's not going to do it. And Antonio Brown has had 1,400 plus, 1,600 plus, 1,800 plus yards in the last 3 seasons on 375 receptions. On top of it all, Marcus Wheaton is not there. Sammy Coates is a role player that's trying to be on a come-up. Ladarius Green wasn't available. Heath Miller has retired. Martavis Bryant couldn't stay off the weed, and as a result, he's out for the season. And Le'Veon Bell is not a guy that's going to be catching passes out of the backfield. Why in God's name, if you are the Washington Redskins, would you not double cover this man? It makes no sense. It is idiotic. It is inexcusable. And Jay Gruden and Barry, the defensive coordinator, cannot be excused on this day for making such a colossal, flagrant error. It's inexcusable.
And Stephen A., with all those missing weapons you just highlighted, they dropped 38 on the Redskins. Imagine this team was at full strength. I'm just salty we didn't get to see the offense like that, but still getting the job done, of course, with Big Ben and Antonio Brown. You can never count them out. And they had a milestone catch last night. They combined for 500 completions. Antonio Brown has over 150 receptions and over 2,000 receiving yards in the last 16 games where Ben Roethlisberger has played, which would be season records. Stephen A., I love this question and this next conversation. Is this the most dangerous quarterback-wide receiver combo we've seen in NFL history?
Say yes. Say yes.
Definitively, I can't say yes. I can tell you that. Let me finish. It is something that I'm strongly considering. The only reason why I'm not definitive about it is because I'm thinking about it and I'm saying Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Jerry Rice. So I'm thinking about it along those ways. I remember Dan Marino with Mark Super Duper Mark Clayton. I remember Dan Fouts with a Charlie Joyner and ultimately a Kellen Winslow. I remember Montana with Rice and Taylor, Steve Young with Rice, the Troy Aikmans, the Michael Irvins. You know what? I might have to say yes. I might have to go with that. I mean, as I sit here and think about it, I have not seen. I'm just, look, Antonio Brown last night began his 7th season. The first 3 years of his career, while he was getting himself acclimated, you have to wonder. But over the last 3 years, if you can give me the last 3 years and just go from there, I don't know. I don't know how we can refute this. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Ben Roethlisberger is better than Joe Montana. I'm not even willing to say that Ben Roethlisberger is more potent than Steve Young because, see, Steve Young, our very own Steve Young, was sensational. And we all know that there's only one Jerry Rice. But as a combination, I have not seen it. Jerry Rice only has, he's got like 4 seasons of over 1,500 yards in his 22-year career. Antonio Brown is entering his 7th season, and he's got 1,800+ season and 3 1,500+ seasons overall. But what I'm seeing right now with Big Ben and Antonio, it might be the best. I don't want to sound blasphemous. It might be the best. I got to reach out to Prime Time, and I got to reach out to Chris Carter. I got to reach out to my boys. I got to figure it out. Max, I don't know, Max. I don't know.
Let me save you
Max,
some time.
I don't want to sound blasphemous.
Let me save you some time.
It might be, Max. Okay. It might be the best.
No, it's not.
It might be.
No, it's not. I can definitively tell you at this moment, it's not. You want to say one day we may look back if they keep doing this forever and ever? Maybe. But let me break this down scientifically, Stephen A. There are 2 ways you can look at the best tandem, right? Quarterback, receiver. You can say who had the greatest longevity at the high level, career value, and who hit the highest heights, who hit the peaks.
Don't bring in longevity.
Well,
Don't bring in longevity, though, because Antonio's in the 7th season. Don't bring in longevity.
Okay, so then it might be too early to say. But or who hit the highest peaks. Now, let's talk first career value. Montana to Rice, until further notice, is #1 when you talk about how high they hit and how long they maintained it. Now, you can say, but look at the yards Antonio Brown's putting up year after year. He did half of what Rice, or almost what Rice did in half the time in terms of peak seasons, because he's playing in an offensive environment that favors the passer. Points are cheap now. They were expensive when Walsh was revolutionizing offense and Montana was hooking up with Rice. Each touchdown was worth much more than it is today. So that's why receivers and quarterbacks keep putting up these monster numbers and eye-popping numbers, because it's easier to do it now than it was then. So, of course, it looks amazing recently, and even compared to their contemporaries, their peers, Roethlisberger and Brown are special, don't get me wrong, but they ain't Montana and Rice yet, even if it looks like the peak is almost there already. Well, now let's talk about the highest heights for a second.
But you're cheating. You're cheating.
How?
You're cheating, man.
Because I haven't even, that's just the one. I haven't hit you with the two yet.
Well, but because
it's a two-piece.
No, the reason I'm saying you're cheating is because you know I'm not measuring in terms of accomplishments, because he's only entering his 7th year, and there's no way that his accomplishments can measure up to what you're talking about. So we know I'm not talking about that.
Okay, would you like to talk about peak?
That's cheating.
Would you like to talk about peak?
Sure, we can go there. We can go there.
Tom Brady and Randy Moss hooked up for 23 touchdowns in a 16-0 season.
That's true.
So they don't have the peak and they don't have the career. So what do they got?
But they lost the Super Bowl to your Giants.
Okay, but that's no question.
They didn't close.
No question
about it. They didn't close. I mean, there's something to be said about the fact that they didn't close.
Okay, but these guys have never won a Super Bowl together. None. I mean, Montana and Rice won 3, and Rice and Young won 1. Roethlisberger's won a Super Bowl, but never with Antonio Brown. So when you look at the career, they haven't done it long enough. That's fair. You can't compare them to Montana and Rice yet. Plus, the offensive era in which they're operating rewards offensive players to a greater extent than it did then. And if you want to talk about peak hit, they haven't hit Randy Moss and Tom Brady yet. Now, here's something you can say about them. You can say that they've put together a 3-year stretch that is as good as any 3-year stretch in the history of football. Although, because it's one receiver, Kurt Warner has Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. Peyton Manning, obviously, with Marvin Harrison, would have something to say about that. But you could say 3 years consecutively, quarterback, receiver. It's as good as any we've seen so far, although they are playing behind a great offensive line with a great running game in an era that favors the pass.
Yeah, you can go there, but I can go back to what you talked about with Randy Moss. Brady was absolutely sensational, 50 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions, if I remember correctly, back in 2007 when he connected with Randy Moss.
Pretty good off the top of your head.
Randy Moss had 98 receptions, Randy Moss had 19 receptions. Was it like 1,493 yards, something along those lines? I'm saying to you, when we look at the numbers that Antonio Brown has put up over the past few years, I mean, the role that they are on right now, I don't know if I've seen, I really, really don't know if I've seen anything like this. This is something that's special. Now, you could be assisted by the rules, and I'm certainly not going to sit up there and act like I can summarily dismiss your point about Randy Moss and Tom Brady, because just the names alone, I mean, it's almost blasphemous to think that there's somebody that could eclipse how great they absolutely were. I get all of that, but I'm looking at Antonio Brown and the 3-year run that he's had and how he just looks to be so completely unstoppable.
Let me say this about Brown. Antonio Brown is trying to make the case for himself that he's the greatest receiver ever. We'll see if he gets there, but he's in that conversation already. And Ben Roethlisberger, you do have to give him credit after I took a little away in the previous argument. He went from a big kind of tough football player with a simple kind of job in the offense who rode a great defense to victories early in his career to a big, strong football player who reads defenses beautifully on the fly, checks down when he has to, improvises, uses his legs, his size, his arm, his brain. He is a complete and all-time great quarterback in his prime.
Thank you for making my points. I appreciate you. I'm very touched by the fact that you needed to close with your little soliloquy, really making my point even better.
Well, you already conceded the argument.
Than I was trying to.
You already conceded the argument, so no big deal.
No, I didn't concede anything. I'm
like it to
saying
me.
that you low. This three-year run is what I'm talking about right here.
the tape
This is
another
something
time.
special.
You
I mean,
DVR
I got
the show,
Hall of
right? Go
Famers
back and watch. You'll
texting
see
me
you
right
conceded
now.
it.
I got Hall of Famers right now texting me right now, telling me I need to be drug tested, but they're missing my point. I get it. I understand it. I'm just talking about what I'm seeing right now. It's special. It's special.
It's so special, and it's so fun to watch. We want you guys to weigh in on this conversation at home. It's a fun one. Which quarterback wide receiver duo best of all time? Montana Rice, Manning Harrison, Brady Moss, Roethlisberger Brown. Go to our First Take Twitter page. Hit us up. We'll share those results a little later in the show. And get your Hall of Famer friends to weigh in as well, Stephen A., would you? I hate reading stories like this next one. Such disappointing news for RG3 and the Browns organization. After just one game, Robert Griffin III is being placed on injured reserve. The team said Griffin is expected to miss an extended period of time after tests revealed a fractured bone in his left shoulder. Coach Hugh Jackson said the plan to designate Griffin to return, meaning he can practice in 6 weeks, but he must miss 8 games. So the earliest Griffin could return would be November 10th at Baltimore. Stephen A., with his long list of injuries now, is this the beginning of the end for RG3?
I don't think there's any question about it. I do believe it is the beginning of the end. I feel the same way about RG3 that I feel about Tony Romo. It's not about their abilities. It's about their durability. And that's where I am with RG3. RG3 was playing in his first game regular season-wise since the season of 2014. It's more than a year and a half since he's played football. He's running out of bounds where he could have easily slid. There was no reason for him to run into the tackler. The tackler was out of bounds, first of all, wasn't even looking to tackle him. He was just basically shielding himself because RG3 was coming right at him. Made absolutely no sense whatsoever. It was a bad play on the part of RG3, who just seems incapable of protecting himself to the degree that a quarterback should know how to protect themselves so they can preserve themselves, live to play another day, live to play another game. That doesn't appear to be the case with RG3. And I think that when you look at his, just the questionable history, the bevy of injuries that he has sustained, combined with the uphill climb that he had. Remember, he's in Cleveland primarily because nobody else really wanted him. Let's just call it what it is. Nobody was knocking down RG3's door to get him to be their quarterback. He fell into the lap of the Cleveland Browns because the Cleveland Browns desperately needed something to move forward, as Max elocuted in days past, and as a result, that's why they went in the direction of RG3. It was cheaper to get him as opposed to doing other things. They ultimately traded down from the number 2 overall pick, ultimately having 14 different picks for April's NFL draft, putting themselves in a position to build a nucleus of players around whatever quarterback they would choose for the future. I have no doubt that RG3 will come back this season and then likely start a few games or whatever the case may be, but he's not reliable. His health is a huge, huge, huge question mark. And his game was a question mark as well. So I think all those things considered, I think you're going to see a lot of executives incredibly reluctant to place their faith in him on that level. And as a result, I think it's the beginning of the end. I don't believe he'll be somebody that will be out of the league, per se. I don't think he'll be somebody that won't get a roster spot, whose NFL career will come to an end in a year or two. But I don't believe that you're going to find anybody that's going to have the level of faith in him where they're willing to say, this is our quarterback for this franchise moving forward. I believe the beginning of the end arrived when the news came down yesterday, and I don't think there's going to be any changes.
The beginning of the end arrived in his rookie season, where in the playoffs he blew up his knee and then talked Shanahan in on the sidelines to letting him stay in the game because RG3 had drank the Kool-Aid about how a football player is supposed to act and everything and rah-rah and all this, and his coach, who should have known better, should not have let him back in that game, and that was the beginning of the end of RG3. We have not seen RG3 since then. We've seen like RG2. Okay, so this last injury, is this the end of RG2 or what is some kind of lesser version of RG3? No, it's not. I think, in fact, when you look at it, if anything, he's going to start to exceed expectations because they have been lowered. He's on the IR. He has to miss 8 games, about exactly half the season. He'll come back a little past the halfway point of the season. He has almost 1 game under his belt. Look, coming out of college, why did he go second? Cam had gone first, and then the following year, Luck goes first. The difference, other than reading defenses for Luck, and he was considered by some maybe potentially the greatest quarterback ever and all that stuff, was that Cam and Luck are big, strong guys. When you looked at RG3, you love his arm. At the combine, he looked better than Luck in many respects, but he was a little smaller, not that he's a frail guy, but not as big and strong as those guys, and played out of the pocket so much that you wondered about durability, and the case has turned out to be he's out of the pocket too much, and as you pointed out, Stephen A., he also doesn't protect himself, doing pretty straightforward and simple things to do, like slide in the clip we just showed. So he's going to miss half this season. When he comes back, Hugh Jackson's going to have had a half a season to start getting the offensive line to play better. Offensive line play is a lot about chemistry, knowing the guy playing next to you, figuring out what you're supposed to do. He's going to have Josh Gordon back, and when he gets back at a little past the halfway point, I expect him to have a good second half of the season. And since expectations are so low, I think he's going to exceed them in the second half of the season. I don't think this is the beginning of the end. RG3 that we once knew is never coming back. But some kind of a solid starting quarterback, he could be that this year. This year.
Well, listen, like I said, you're wrong, and the facts prove it, because RG3 is not reliable. The fact of the matter is that you sit there, literally, it feels like if you sneeze in his direction, he'll catch pneumonia. I mean, that's how bad it is right now for him. Everything that can happen can go wrong, has gone wrong since his rookie campaign, that game against the Baltimore Ravens, where Haloti Ngata nearly had his leg amputated, for crying out loud, because of that hit, and he's never recovered from there. Psychologically, he hasn't been up to snuff at times in the past. This time he got himself together. He got himself in a situation with a coach like Hugh Jackson, who clearly has faith in him. But you're looking at RG3. There were some throws that he missed before he got hurt the other day. And there were also dropped passes by receivers. There's no doubt about that. And it did have me fantasizing for a little while what it would look like if he had Terrell Pryor and Josh Gordon to throw the football to. No doubt about that. So I'm not, again, but this is not a subject. This is not something that we're debating as it pertains to his skill set. This pertains to his reliability due to his availability or lack thereof. And that's where the challenge comes into play here. When I think about RG3, I'm waiting for him to get hurt now. I'm waiting for him for something to go wrong with him now. I don't want to call him an accident waiting to happen, because he doesn't wear a Dallas Cowboys uniform, but there are exceptions where that's applicable. It happens with Jay Cutler. It happens with RG3. And of course it happens with the Dallas Cowboys. I look at a Tony Romo, that's what I see. I look at an RG3, that's what I see. I see individuals that somehow, some way, something will go wrong at the most inopportune time imaginable, and that's what it comes down to. I think you've got a lot of faith, Max, in RG3. You believe in his ability. I respect that. I don't believe he's a scrub. I believe he can play, but I also believe he's fragile, and the NFL is no place for fragility. No place at all. And that definitely is applicable to RG3.
I would say also,
and that's why I believe it's the beginning of the end.
I would say also it's a probability thing. These things are not set in stone. What are the odds that a guy gets hurt? Well,
right,
what are the odds that a play
that's what we're talking about.
Right. What are the odds that a play breaks down? Well, and that you're outside the pocket to begin with because a play broke down. Not that that's the only reason to be outside the pocket, but oftentimes. Well, it's when the line doesn't know what they're doing yet. Hugh Jackson is something of an offensive line guru, but that takes time.
What did the line have to do with RG3 running into a defender out of bounds instead of sliding or getting the hell out of bounds 2 yards earlier?
What
did that have to do with the offensive line?
If you have an issue with that, the number of times you're out of the pocket because your offensive line is not doing the job will tend to be higher if the O-line's not good, but will tend to be lower, lowering the probability of injury if they are good. And I expect Hugh Jackson, by halfway through this season, it's not going to be like a magic trick, but I expect him to play better as a unit, not to mention you get Gordon back, and you mentioned Pryor. Now he has downfield targets.
Well, first of all, Professor Kellerman, let me tell you something, okay? Stop with the all probability and quantitatively and all of this other stuff that you throw out there all the damn time. We know exactly. I mean, who's here saying definitively, okay, he's going to get hurt on this play in this game or whatever? Of course we're talking probabilities. Stop acting like we don't know.
So does it go up or down?
That's what you're saying. Of course it is.
So does it go up or down if your line is good?
If you got, hold on. The point is that regardless of whether he wants to scramble or not, the issue at hand is his inability to know how to protect himself. There were many years that Tom Brady played with a questionable offensive line. There were several years Peyton Manning played with a questionable offensive line, but they knew how to get down. They knew how not just slide, they knew how to get down. They had pocket presence. They understood there's certain things you don't need to be challenging. You don't need to be gung-ho about that. RG3 can't seem to get that out his system, which is why he's gotten hurt on several occasions. And I don't see it changing.
I think it's safe to say that the Tom Brady and Peyton Manning boat has sailed. Those ships have sailed. RG3 is not going to be Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. In fact, I'm saying
not
he's never going to be what he was as a rookie even.
Injury.
What I'm saying is, as a rookie, you can be worse than RG3 as a rookie and be an effective NFL quarterback, and that's what I expect from RG3. Yes, there's always a chance for injury. That chance goes down as the O-line plays better, which I also expect from a Hugh Jackson team.
You really stepped out. You really stepped out on a limb, Max. There's really a chance for injury. Who the hell doesn't know that? Of course there's a chance for injury.
You just said don't talk about probability.
We're talking about RG3.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, guess what? We're going to be talking about Josh McCown now.
Look into your crystal ball and tell me exactly what's going to happen.
Let me write that down. Let me write that down. Probability.
Please do that. We're going to
probability.
Yeah.
Coming up
next.
Okay,
I'm writing it down, Max.
No, tell me definitively what's going to happen in your crystal ball.
Okay.
Nobody listens to me. No one listens to Molly.
I'm sorry.
No one. America's team took Ezekiel Elliott 4th overall, and at one point, Zeke had the highest-selling jersey. But did his debut live up to it? According to Zeke, his NFL debut was just average, despite the fact that he did score his first career touchdown. That's a quote from him. That's not why I was brought here to be average. So we've got a lot of work to get done, a lot to work on. Stephen A., what do you expect from Ezekiel Elliott the rest of the season?
Well, I think the first thing that I expect from Ezekiel Elliott is for him to stop lying to the American public. He called himself average. It was significantly below average. A matter of fact, it was quite putrid, and that's a word that Ezekiel Elliott should know. 20 carries for 51 yards. That's a 2.6 yard per carry average. Somebody needs to tell Ezekiel Elliott that a guy by the name of Ray Rice is not in the league primarily because people keep saying, even though we're trying to move beyond the whole domestic violence thing, the dude was on the downslide because he was only averaging 3 yards a carry when he ultimately ended up out of the league. You start your first day in the league coming from Ohio State, rushing for over 200 yards in your last game in a Buckeyes uniform, being the stud that you were, ultimately ending up being a top 5 pick in the NFL draft and playing behind what is widely considered to be the best offensive line in all of football, and you could barely do a damn thing. So when you sit up there and call your performance average, with the exception of that one TD yard scamper, I think it was for about 6 yards, you did pretty close to nothing the entire day. So when you say it was average, I like Ezekiel Elliott. I've got faith in him. I believe in his abilities. But the first thing he needs to do is to stop lying to himself and to the American public, and that's what I expect from him, by calling his performance average. It was below average, significantly below average. And if you continue to average 2.6 yards per carry, I promise you, we're going to see a hell of a lot more of Alfred Morris and Darren McFadden when he returns than we will see from Ezekiel Elliott, because he looked like Trent Richardson out of Bama, the former number 3 overall pick. We knew Trent Richardson could play too. Real stocky, short, muscular, hardcore, had a lot of power. But when he got to the NFL level, those are grown men that you're going up against with families to feed and mortgages to pay. And they ain't worried about you and your strength because they've got their own. You've got to have some elusivity to your game, some versatility, some quickness, some speed, some agility. You've got to have all of that. You've got to bring the whole arsenal. And I'm saying to Ezekiel Elliott, we didn't see that this past Sunday against the New York Giants. We didn't see it at all. Them acquiring Damon Harrison from the New York Jets, who is primarily recognized as a run stopper, certainly has helped to buffer the Giants' defensive front four, and I give them credit for that. And their defense looks better. We'll see as the season progresses. But Ezekiel Elliott, to answer the question directly, what I expect from him is to be more of a truth teller, to call it like it is, and when you stink up the joint, own it, okay? Because you ain't going to progress if you can't admit how much you initially regressed. That's what I expect from Ezekiel Elliott, and I think truthfulness is ultimately the way towards prosperity, particularly in his case. To sit up there and delude yourself makes you an official member of the Dallas Cowboys, and I don't think you want that right now.
No, telling the truth doesn't hurt. But you know what really helps in terms of prosperity? Running behind a great offensive line. That's what the Dallas Cowboys have. Ezekiel Elliott is going to be just fine. You saw in college when the stakes were at their highest, he was at his best against the best competition. Now, where there is a kind of crack in the facade of the Cowboys offensive line, maybe it's Doug Free, maybe it's the right tackle, you know, veteran guy, maybe on the back nine of his career. And for a running back, that's kind of important that the right side of the line is good, especially as many times as Ezekiel Elliott's broken his left hand. He carries up on the right side as a right-handed quarterback. And generally, if you don't have real protection there, your run game could be a little suspect. But we saw DeMarco Murray, not the most elusive guy, run behind very much the same line or a similar line and rack up the yards. If you want to look at week one and try to forecast his season, now, we don't have other evidence on Ezekiel Elliott in the NFL. But Adrian Peterson had 19 carries for 31 yards behind a really good offensive line in Minnesota. And we have a whole history with Adrian Peterson. We know he's one of the greatest players who ever lived, so no one's panicking. But Adrian Peterson was worse. I mean, you know, Ezekiel Elliott on 20 carries had 51 yards. Adrian Peterson on 19 had 31. Todd Gurley, and I think a lot of Ezekiel Elliott, I think behind the similar offensive line, to Todd Gurley, he wouldn't be as good. You know, Gurley, I think, is another level of talent, even from Ezekiel Elliott. Gurley carried the ball 17 times, had 47 yards. They're good running backs. We saw Gurley last year. He's an excellent running back already. One of the top 2 or 3 in the game, you could argue. Adrian Peterson's one of the greatest who ever lived. Still, you know, expected to have a big season. Neither guy did anything. And particularly in Peterson's case, running behind a good line. So one game is a tiny sample size. You know Ezekiel Elliott's going to be good. I would not say Trent Richardson at all. You want to say a DeMarco Murray? Okay, he runs downhill more than side to side and all that kind of stuff. Not super elusive. But behind this line, a guy who runs that way can and will have a lot of success, and that goes for Ezekiel Elliott this year.
Max, let me tell you why I so strongly disagree with you, because I think you're missing a point here. You're not wrong about anything you're saying. You're just incomplete. You're not taking into account 2 things. Number one, the guys he has to compete against. In terms of Alfred Morris, who was effective for the Dallas Cowboys in the second half, was actually better than Ezekiel Elliott was, along with Darren McFadden's return because he had a 1,000-yard season last year. And you're not taking into account the fact that even though he's the number 4 overall pick and it's in their best interest to ensure his success, the flip side is the Dallas Cowboys are a bit desperate because time is running out on Romo. They know that they've got Dak Prescott, but they would prefer to have Romo because of his experience and how far a veteran could take you as opposed to a rookie. And you've heard Jerry Jones allude to this on several occasions publicly. Clock's ticking. He's not getting much younger. Dallas Cowboy fan base, 20 plus years since a Super Bowl appearance, let alone a title. You've got all of those things working against Ezekiel Elliott. He is not some rookie that's coming in that just has the cart laid out for him where here's the ball, it's your show, it's your team because you're the number 4 overall pick and we're investing in you. They've got 2 other backs that they can rely upon. They've got a quarterback that they're expecting to come back, and they've got an owner desperate to win now.
If they thought they could rely on the other running backs, they wouldn't have used their first-round pick on Ezekiel Elliott. They were also playing the Giants.
No, remember, Alfred Morris came
the fact. But McFadden, fine. But they still picked up Alfred Morris. Ezekiel Elliott's going to get, he's going to be the bell cow, if not the primary option, or vice versa. You look at the Giants, where they spent their money, defensive line. You didn't mention Olivier Vernon, who's, you know, goes after the quarterback, but is also good against the run.
I forgot him.
Yeah, Dak Prescott.
I just forgot his name. I just forgot him.
Right, $200 million on the line and in the secondary, not the safeties, not the linebackers, but the corners. So here you have a rookie quarterback, you know, not deer in headlights, but certainly it's a big experience for him. And his best receiver down the field, there's a blanket on him where no matter where he goes, because they got 3 guys who can play at the corner position, the Giants do, and they have a vastly improved defensive line, making it difficult up front. So it's harder on Prescott. It's harder on Ezekiel Elliott. It's his first game. He's going to be fine. Ezekiel Elliott's going to have a big year.
Okay, you can believe that. I'm not so sure. I hope he does, but I ain't so sure.
We will leave it
Got
there.
him on your fantasy team. You better hope he does.
So Zeke has something to prove.
I had to because I just learned to play fantasy, and y'all tricked me.
We will leave that one there. Don't have time to touch it.
Well, I know Josh, man. He's one of my good friends. We talk a lot in the offseason. You know, I got a lot of respect for him. He got a big mouth, but he got a big game as well. And he backs it up. And he's a competitor. I'm sure he wanted to play me, but I don't know, was it his coach scheme or what they thought. But I know he wanted to play against me one-on-one the whole game if it's up to him.
They had an excellent game plan. They, executed it flawlessly. I just think, they took us behind the woodshed today and wore our tail out. They gave us a good old-fashioned butt whooping. That's what it was, and can't take anything away from that. And gotta respect them. Hats off to them, and go back and get ready for next week and Dallas Cowboys.
In case you forgot, the Redskins gave a 5-year, $75 million deal to Josh Norman, yet he was rarely ever on the league's best receiver last night, Antonio Brown. And the Steelers' offense, who is missing key offensive weapons, put up 38 on their defense. Tim Hasselbeck in the house. Always good to see you.
See you.
We want to get your thoughts on this.
Okay.
Do you think Washington overpaid for Norman? Was that proven last night?
No, I don't think they necessarily overpaid for him. I just think they used him the wrong way. I mean, I think there probably has to be a bigger conversation about, well, if you're going to pay someone this much money, well, how are you going to use him? I mean, it'd be like, paying a quarterback a ton of money and then removing him to run the Wildcat. I mean, we don't see people do that anymore. So I don't think you can debate that he's one of the best corners in the game. I think when you saw him on Antonio Brown, who is clearly the best receiver in the game, he actually held his own against him. The problem was it just wasn't as often. So I think it's premature to say that. I think the bigger concern is how you're using him.
I think they did overpay him, and it's not because in a kind of vacuum he's not worth the money, but it's not a vacuum. There's a salary cap league. You have finite resources. You have a lot of situations to address. They had a D-line issue. They did not address it. They spent all the money in the secondary, where in Breland they thought they had a guy in the secondary anyway. And so what winds up happening? You get pushed around up front. So $75 million for a guy who's paid like a shutdown guy, and there's so few who have really ever lived who's a genuine shutdown guy, but he's really not a shutdown corner, but you paid him sort of shutdown cornerish money.
See,
and you have holes. You think it's a shutdown corner?
Well,
yeah. I mean, I don't, and there's this kind of belief that he's like the zone defender or something. I don't think that's the case. Listen, people go away from him. I mean, listen, Antonio Brown was intentionally lined up away from him. That's the best receiver in football, and the Steelers avoided him. Like, if that doesn't tell you what the league thinks of Norman as a player, like, I don't know what does.
Well, go ahead, Stephen.
Allow me to chime in here. I don't think that Josh Norman was underpaid, Max. I disagree with you there. But Tim, what I would like you to just, edify me, help me out here in terms of correcting me on whatever I have to say. I'm of the mindset that you're the Redskins. You're the ones who went out and paid him $75 million. You're the one who guaranteed him $50 million. Why are you restricting him to one side of the field as opposed to having him line up wherever the best receiver in football is? Isn't that a schematic thing? Isn't that something that Barry and Jay Gruden, your head coach, isn't that a decision that they're making? Isn't it what they're supposed to be doing? As opposed to saying, well, we're going to leave Josh Norman on this one side of the field and allowing the Steelers to just go on the opposite side no matter what. Isn't that something the Redskins coaching is supposed to correct?
It is, but I think that goes back to, we hear it all the time about coaches versus scouts or personnel departments. The reality is that Joe Barry didn't decide to make him the highest paid corner. Jay Gruden didn't decide to make him the highest paid corner. That's what happens when personnel departments decide to pay a certain player or do a certain thing. And listen, we saw it with the Houston Texans. Bill O'Brien never had a conversation with Brock Osweiler before he became his starting quarterback. Like, I think sometimes we get it wrong when we start to assume that a quarterback coach or an offensive coordinator or even a head coach has the type of influence on personnel that we just kind of make that assumption.
Well,
but
let
you
me
just said
challenge
he's a
that.
shutdown corner. So if
I think he is.
So, but the coaching staff doesn't?
So they're not using him correctly, would be what I say, yes. Which I think is Stephen A's point.
But I also ask this question. I find it hard to believe that a personnel department for any team in the National Football League would just go out and pay a player a boatload of money without hearing from the coaches about what they think about the individual and how they think the individual could be utilized, which is why I'm looking at the Redskins coaching staff for what transpired with Josh Norman yesterday. But I also would say this last point, and then I'll give it to you guys. I spoke to a couple of cats last night, and one of the things that they said to me was that Josh Norman should have asked for Antonio Brown. You know, the hell with just going along with what the Redskins coaches schematically had put forth. The bottom line is if you're that dude, you ask for it. They even pointed out how D'Angelo Hall, in the past, when he was playing corner, would have never just sat idly by and accepted the assignment. He would have insisted that he be the one going up against an elite wide receiver. He would have wanted that assignment. I don't know whether that's the case with Josh Norman or not. I believe that Josh Norman ain't shying away from none of that. But you do have people this morning questioning how bad Josh Norman wanted some of Antonio Brown in his first game with the Redskins in a nationally televised Monday Night Football game. There are people who have texted me who are questioning how much Josh Norman wanted Antonio Brown.
Listen, I've never seen Josh Norman shy away from going against anybody.
Neither have I.
I would think that Josh Norman would want the challenge. To, you know, why, and to your point about speaking up on it, Stephen A., I've seen people speak up on it before, and it's not out of, you know, for a number one guy to say, hey, listen, I want the challenge. I think it probably is about the dynamic of being a new guy, and you heard his quotes after the game talking about, look, I'm not questioning coaches. They know more than me. Here's why you don't do it, and I think this is, it's important to make this point because everyone's saying, this is crazy, he doesn't follow everyone all over the field. Guys, in a new system, on a new team, and I think we all agree we would rather have him playing outside the numbers than Breland on Antonio Brown. Sure. Well, Todd Haley doesn't just line these guys up in stationary spots for the entire game. What happens when he's in the slot and you have some type of Mike nickel will blitz called? Well, now all of a sudden you've got your nickel will blitzing, who happens to be Josh Norman, who is planning on being lined up against Antonio Brown.
Tim,
so now what's the check?
Tim,
what's
can
the
I ask
check
you a question?
Yeah.
I have another question. Are we giving D'Angelo Hall a pass? Because I'm thinking you're a free safety. You played corner. You're highly intelligent. You played in this game for a very long time. Josh Norman is supposed to be that guy capable of being a shutdown corner, clearly a top 5 corner in the game. So if the Redskins got him, then shouldn't D'Angelo Hall have been the one over the top? Because I did see him in the vicinity when Antonio Brown caught both of his touchdown passes. So was he late getting over? Are we letting him off the hook in terms of not pointing out what D'Angelo Hall was supposed to do? Or is this simply about the coaches?
There's no question. I mean, part of it is not knowing what they've asked of D'Angelo Hall on that play. You look at 2 4th-down plays, okay? Same formation, same exact play call. Breland gets beat on the go route by Antonio Brown on the first one. D'Angelo Hall, my estimation, is out of position. Why he isn't helping Breland there on a go route, I think is whether he was coached that way in terms of his alignment or whatever reason. The next time they do it, look at how deep he is. Look at how deep he learned his lesson. He's a smart football player. Learned his lesson, he was deep, which is why the same exact play is called. And where did Ben go with the football? He went to Eli Rogers on the over route, the very next play. So, look, part of it is, all right, this is what you did with Norman. All right, well, when Breland is on Antonio Brown, how are you helping him? I think this is less about Josh Norman and more about the staff and the plan on the defensive side of the ball for Washington.
I don't think it's about Josh Norman per se, but I do think that where they chose to invest resources, like a guy like Terrence Knighton, whether or not he's still a world beater and everything, you let him walk What do you do about the middle of your defensive line? And then you're up against a quarterback, too, in Ben Roethlisberger, who's, I think, at the best he's ever played, behind a great offensive line, checking down, improvising, and even when your defense starts to do some good things, he still figures out a way to make lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah, well, listen, I don't disagree with any of that on Ben. I think they feel like they're making do with guys like Chris Baker in the middle. I mean, I think that's how they felt about it. I think we have to just say, well, listen, hey, how are you using this guy that you're paying all the money to? In my estimation, he's still a great player. I don't know if they're using him the right way.
It's going to be very interesting to see if they change their plan now, because he has Des Bryant this week and then ODB the following.
Well, that's why you would think you would go play him, because you're going to play, Odell Beckham Jr. twice. You're going to play Des twice. You're going to play people in these divisions twice. So that's how I look at it.
But all eyes will be on that secondary for sure, which led us to our question here for you guys. We want you to weigh in at home. Which is the best quarterback wide receiver duo of all time? Montana Rice, Manning Harrison, Brady Moss, Roethlisberger Brown. Did we miss one? Go to the First Take Twitter page to vote. We'll share those results a little later in the show. But coming up next. So week 1 is in the books, and early MVP candidates are already making their case. Aaron Rodgers was impressive in a road win over the Jags. Big Ben and Antonio Brown put up big numbers, as we've been discussing on Monday Night Football. Drew Brees, Andrew Luck each threw 4 touchdowns in losing efforts. Max, I want to start with you here.
Yeah.
Is Luck still your MVP pick after that loss?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. 385 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 or 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He is 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's on a team that I believe is going to win the AFC South. I know the Jags have gotten a lot better, and they have a better overall team. I think that's going to help Luck's case. I don't believe in the Texans still, but, time will tell. I think the Colts are going to win the division. I think the only real weapon they have on either side of the ball is Andrew Luck. I think he's going to get credit for that. Guys like Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown, if they ball all year, will split votes. If they are going to consider a receiver something other than a quarterback, I don't think J.J. Watt's going to be able to sustain the level of play he has recently, just because no one's ever really done it, and still remain the elite defensive player in the league. Aaron Donald and others will have something to say about that. So I think Luck will get them to the playoffs, put up monster numbers, and will be the leading candidate for MVP.
I think it's a strong case.
First of all, I'm sorry, Tim. Let me chime in here real quick. First of all, your argument is inconsistent, Max Kellerman, but I'm so surprised at that. You said he was going to be league MVP. Now you're saying he's going to be up there for the vote. Make up your
he's
mind.
Going to win
Keep
league
this in mind.
MVP. He will win. Read my lips. Andrew Luck is your MVP.
All right. Well, then, damn it, make sure you close your argument by saying that instead say he's going to be one of the leading vote getters.
No. I was explaining how he was going to get the most votes. That even if you think it's Roethlisberger.
I didn't comprehend. I didn't comprehend. Here's the deal. Here's why your argument is going to go by the wayside. Because T.J. Green and Patrick Robinson got hurt. That's the position they could ill afford to get injuries at, with Clayton Gaithers, with Vontae Davis, with Darius Butler, all out to begin with. So the fact that you've got a decimated secondary, combined with the fact that they just gave up 39 points and lost, combined with the fact that their defense is so highly suspect, Andrew Luck may put up big numbers, but it is going to be for a mediocre team. And as a result, he won't win MVP.
Which may be enough in the AFC South. And by the way, he should have won the game. Like, his defense let him down. He kind of won the game in the fourth quarter.
See, to me,
we got your point. We got your point. You're wrong. We got your point. You're just wrong.
Your point of why his numbers are going to be ridiculous are right on. The problem is, I think I view, and I believe Stephen A. views it this way too, that the AFC South, while there aren't perfect teams there, I don't think that Andrew even is good enough to have the Colts win that division. They are so depleted at corner. They have no pass rush. And I think this scenario of having the lead when Andrew Luck leaves the field because he threw for 385 yards and 4 touchdowns may show itself. Like that's going to happen a lot. But then the defense is going to be out on the field again. To me, I also look at the Houston Texans and think, man, Will Fuller coming along, DeAndre Hopkins is a beast, and Brock Osweiler played, and Lamar Miller looks like he's actually going to run the football well. I think that's a pretty good team. And I think Jacksonville is so improved, I think Jacksonville could beat them twice.
Agreed on Jacksonville. I just want to point out Andrew Luck. 2-14, that's why you draft him. You get to draft him because you're 2-14. 11, as soon as he shows up, 11-5, 11-5, 11-5, playoffs each time. And then as soon as he gets hurt, 8-8. I know he wasn't playing well before he got hurt, but I don't think it's just coincidence. You're 8-8, no playoffs. You're 2-14, obviously no playoffs. But with him on the field for the season, you are a double-digit win playoff team, and they were no great shakes back then.
They weren't. The problem is he's 100% healthy right now. With the way that he was running around and hanging in there, they started off that game with him spitting the football out. You know, hey, ball's going to come out early. He's not going to hold on to it. He's not going to get hit. Well, next thing you know, you get into a shootout because your defense stinks. And what did we see? Hanging onto the football, waiting for T.Y. to pop open, you know, down the field. I just don't know that that will work when you're 10 weeks in and you've had your brains beat in for the last 8 weeks.
Yeah, that game could have gone either way. It didn't go their way, but it was almost a one-man show and a win. Win or lose, it's going to be a one-man show all year, and I think voters will give them credit so long as their record is decent.
I just think it's going to be tough when there's 12
one-man shows for mediocre
teams.
teams are not winning league MVP.
No.
Period.
You win 9 or 10 games and squeak into the playoffs, you might.
See, I think
it's not happening,
there'll
Max.
be a team. There's going to be a team that's got 14 wins and their quarterback has, you know, great numbers. That's
Tim.
the problem.
Who?
So it may be Pittsburgh.
Tim, I'm surprised you're not picking up on this. I'm surprised you're not picking up on this, Tim. He's just being emotional.
No.
He's just being emotional because he wants Andrew Luck to win the league MVP. That's what this is all about.
I tried
He's
to
caught up
warn
in his
everyone
emotions
about
right now.
Cam
That's
last
it.
year. Everyone forgot about Cam. Then he goes out and goes, oh, yeah, Cam is an incredible player. And people have just forgotten about Andrew Luck. You just forget about Andrew Luck, a guy who's been identified since college. That guy might be the best ever. A guy who last year Aaron Rodgers says, this guy's getting ready to take over from me. A guy who just threw for almost 400 yards with 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's 6'5", can run, can throw.
Better.
He's smart. He can read defenses. He's not going to be
Jameis
MVP.
Winston have any shot to win the MVP over Andrew Luck?
Jameis is good, but the answer is no, I don't think so.
Why?
I don't think he'll be.
Because he could have similar numbers.
I don't think he will, but he's on his way. He's on his way. I don't think he will.
Max, I think you're alone on an island on this one. Tim, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your perspective. And speaking of being on an island, our next guest enjoyed his visit to Revis Island on Sunday. Listen to this. His 12 receptions and 180 yards against the Jets were most in a season opener in Bengals history. He's the 6th player since the merger to have at least 150 yards in a season opener. Green's touchdown over Revis was his 3rd career TD of over 50 yards. But in the NFL since he entered the league, we welcome Cincinnati Bengals star receiver A.J. Green, who joins us thanks to Rock and Refuel. A.J., thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank y'all for having me.
We appreciate it. So not a bad day in the office for you on Sunday, as we just highlighted. When did you know you'd get the better of Darrelle Revis?
You know, I didn't know. You know, my job was out there. Just go out there and play as hard as I can and try to make plays and put my team in the best situation to win. And that's what I try to do each and every week, just go out there and win the one-on-one matchups.
You know, AJ, thanks for coming on the show, man. This is Stephen A. I got to ask you this. I mean, I'm looking at your team right now. From a talent perspective, y'all are one of the best. There's no question that y'all have the talent, and it certainly helps that they have you. However, I want to know what your focus is coming into this season compared to seasons past, considering how last year ended for y'all with that whole chaos against the Steelers in the playoffs.
You know, for me, it starts with Andy and I, and this offense run through us. And as we go, you know, our offense go, and that's my approach week in and week out of this year. I have to be that dog out there and make every play to put my team in the best situation to win. So that's my approach.
AJ, with this, Max Kellerman here, this era of receivers, it's kind of like the best catch anyone's ever seen is the last great one they saw. And watching you or Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham Jr. or Julio Jones, and there are others that I'm not even mentioning, that you can't imagine that someone's better than that guy when you got your eyes on him. Where do you rank among the game's best receivers?
I think I'm one of the best. You know,
Clearly,
I
but
feel
where?
like my body of work speak. Yeah, I don't put myself wherever y'all want to put me, but I'm definitely think I'm the best. I'm not gonna say ain't nobody's better than me, but you know, you gotta look at the body of work. You know, I've been doing this since I got in this league, so I don't have to, you know, showcase my talents or talk about how good I am. I just let my play do all the talking, and that's the guy who I am, and that's. Go ahead.
AJ, you certainly don't have to do that with me, bro. And I'm a Steelers fan, but you certainly don't have to do that with me. We know how legit you are, and you know, and you and I have spoken on several occasions in the past. You know my issue is not with you. My issue is with that damn team of y'all that cannot win a playoff game to save y'all lives. I want to know, what is the mentality of the Cincinnati Bengals this year, and when are y'all going to get to the point where y'all going to win a playoff game? That's what I want to know. I'm asking that week 1 because I got you here in front of me. That's what I want to know.
All right. I know you don't like us, Stephen A., but it's fine. It's fine. We're gonna prove you wrong one day. We're gonna prove you wrong, and we're gonna have this conversation again. But like I said, man, we're just taking a week at a time. And like last year, it was very heartbreaking just to go out there and lose a game like that. And the game that we thought we were the better team, and we had that game won. But this year's a new team. Like this year, Coach Lewis is always preaching: keep our poise. It's a new team, new guys, new season, and that's the approach we're taking. And me as a leader, that's what I got to enforce into our locker room.
AJ, I was really looking forward to watching you guys play with Andy Dalton in the playoffs last year because it felt like he turned the corner, and I thought there were indications maybe he'd play well in the playoffs last year for the first time, really well up to his ability. The way he was playing in fourth quarters, better than the rest of the game, the way he was playing in primetime games, et cetera. Can you speak to that at all, the Andy Dalton from last year? Was there a difference from the Andy Dalton in the past?
Of course. You saw how he started the season, how we started the season. He was having an MVP season. And, you know, just having him go out the way he went out is definitely a loss for the team when you lose one of your best guys. And being the quarterback is even harder. So, like I said, it's so good to see him back here this year, and he's healthy, and you saw what he did week 1. He got knocked down a couple of times, but his poise and his presence in that pocket that we made plays when we needed to.
AJ, while you're on the air, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. I know you got to run, and I'm going to let Molly take it away, but I want you to know, you know I like you. I like Pac-Man. I know Montez can play. I don't like the fact that y'all keep losing in the damn playoffs. There's not a single playoff win in Marvin Lewis's coaching career here. That's what I don't like. I just want the record to be straight.
I got you. I understand, Steve. I understand. We're going to get this straight once we win this playoff game, and we're going to revisit this conversation.
Okay. I love it. AJ, now that we're good on that, we want you to weigh in on this conversation we've been having on the show today. We have a Twitter poll, and it's which is the best quarterback-wide receiver combo of all time. We want to get your thoughts on that.
All time?
All time. Anyone in history. Bring it back.
I like Randy Moss and Culpepper.
Culpepper. Okay, that's a new one. We like it. Thank you so much for the time. Best of luck this season, and we can't wait to see you. You'll be in the Steel City this weekend. Always fun. Bengals, Steelers. We'll tune in for that for sure. Coming up next, those Cardinals lost the season opener at home to a Patriots team without their starting quarterback, tight end, and a banged-up line. From the top down, the Cardinals organization is not pleased. See this behind us? Some think the sky is falling on Arizona. Team GM Steve Keim, one of them. He had strong words for the team in an interview with the Doug and Wolf Show on Arizona Sports 98.7 FM in Phoenix. Take a listen.
You wake up Monday morning with a loss, you're angry, disappointed, embarrassed, and that's the way we should all feel. You know, just didn't get it done, and a lot of reasons why we didn't get it done, and that needs to improve. It's certainly unacceptable. The sky is falling Monday, and that's the feel that all of us should have, and use that as a chip on our shoulder to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Do you believe in the theory that sometimes there can be a good loss?
No. Not when you're playing a backup quarterback and they're missing some playmakers, and it's a game at home.
So before week 1, we made our Super Bowl pick, Stephen A. I went with the Cardinals, and now after week 1, the question is, are the Cardinals still a Super Bowl contender? Your thoughts?
Well, of course they are. They have the personnel and the coaching staff to validate their Super Bowl contention aspirations. The fact is that it was a bad night. It's a very, very bad night when you consider the fact that they were playing against a backup in Jimmy Garoppolo, who didn't have their number 1 weapon in Rob Gronkowski outside of Tom Brady. Essentially, the New England Patriots were without their 2 most formidable weapons and still beat the Arizona Cardinals. But let's also keep in mind, it is game 1 of the NFL season. As Max accurately pointed out, the great Bill Belichick had numerous weeks to prepare for this matchup, which is not something you're going to have for a bevy of other games during the regular season. And then let's also look into their personnel. You got the Honey Badger back. Okay, he's one of your safeties, all right, along with Jefferson. You got Peterson as one of your corners with Williams as another. You got Mentor and Branch in terms of the linebacker spot along with Buchanan. You got Chandler Jones and Calais Campbell on the edges. Look, that's a defense. And when you think about them offensively, Larry Fitzgerald is just showing that he's got more life. Michael Floyd and John Brown are no joke. Duke Johnson is, not Duke, but I'm saying Derek Johnson, the brother can play. We all know how formidable he can be. Their offensive line is decent, and they're fresh off of an NFC championship game. So one game doesn't make a season. We understand that it's very early. We also understand and we appreciate, I think we should appreciate what the GM's saying. He's saying you should treat it like the sky is falling. You should treat it like it was a missed opportunity. You should treat it like it was a huge, huge problem for you to find yourself in this position, because there is no doubt they came up short, underachieved, and did all of those different things. But at the end of the day, it's one game. And it's the first game of the regular season going up against the great Bill Belichick, who had the entire offseason, all summer, training camp, preseason, etc., to prepare his backup quarterback for this one game. And so when you look at it from that perspective, I don't think there's any reason to hit the panic button. But I love the fact that the GM sounded like he's willing to hit the panic button, because it shows that they have expectations that they expect to be validated. And I like that, because that's what winners are made of.
For the second consecutive season, you look at the Arizona Cardinals and you say, this is the best overall team in the NFL, both sides of the ball. Where's the weakness, really? They're really a tremendous regular season team. But the indication that they're not actually Super Bowl contenders came in the first game this year and came in the last game they played last year. Even the game before that, they just squeaked by Green Bay. I mean, Aaron Rodgers almost pulled a rabbit out of a hat, and Green Bay did not have their full complement of players. That was not the Packers that are going to exist this year, and they barely got by them in overtime, and then got thumped by the Panthers, and then got beaten by a Patriots team. Not only did they not have Tom Brady or Gronkowski or their number one running back in Deion Lewis, they didn't have either of their starting tackles, and the Patriots beat them because Belichick had time to prepare for them. Well, guess what happens in the playoffs? Coaches have time to prepare. They can focus on you differently than they can in the regular season. And that's what the Cardinals are going to run into again. And I'm sorry, but Carson Palmer, who was prematurely anointed, I remember, going back, 10 years now? There's Peyton and there's Brady, and here comes Carson Palmer, and it didn't exactly work out that way. And now he's had a renaissance later in his career. And yet, when the lights shone brightest, he came up short. Now, I thought Seattle was going to win the Super Bowl, and I'm still going to ride with them, but that offensive line in week one may be a bigger problem than we thought. The Patriots in the AFC and the Steelers in the AFC, but the Steelers, certainly there are issues. The Panthers, you can argue, are still favorites. There are various teams. None of them are perfect. I think all of them have a better shot to win once the playoffs start, not to mention the Packers. Once the playoffs start, than the Arizona Cardinals. You need a quarterback to perform under pressure. You need a coach to be able to game plan when the other coach also has time.
Well, first of all, a couple of things. You're going to have to define, and I say this rhetorically because I got a couple of other points I'd like to make, but you're going to have to define for me what your definition of contender is. A champion is a champion. A contender is somebody who ultimately loses to the champions. So when I look at the Arizona Cardinals, yeah, you didn't make the Super Bowl, but that's because you lost in the NFC Championship game to the NFC champion Carolina Panthers. And so to me, that's the definition of contender, which is what this subject was about. Secondly, when you bring in a bevy of other teams, whether it's Pittsburgh or Cincinnati, whether it's all of these other teams, the fact is you don't have to play most. You don't have to play anybody in the AFC come playoff time unless you make it to the Super Bowl if you're Arizona. And in the NFC, we saw Seattle struggle with Miami. We saw Green Bay struggle with Jacksonville. We see the NFC East, and we don't think much about any of those teams right now. And so I think, and then, of course, we see the NFC South Oh, yeah, you got Carolina, and we can't ignore Jameis Winston and what he's capable of doing, or Drew Brees for that matter. But there's no doubt that Arizona can compete for with those teams. So I say that to say this. And then you point out, oh, well, there's time to prepare. Well, that's not necessarily so. Because in the playoffs, there's playoff games every week, just like they are during the regular season. If you're the division winner and the number 1 or number 2 seed, you get a bye week to prepare in all likelihood. And if you're not one of those 2 teams, but you're going up against one of those 2 teams, they get to prepare for you, but you got to prepare for somebody else and then go week to week because you've got games every week. So when you speak to the level of time that you have to prepare, that's not accurate for the playoffs in most situations. It's accurate for the Super Bowl, but it's not accurate for the playoffs.
If Arizona wins the division outright, gets a bye, yeah.
All right, but when you ask the question for contender status, I think it's clear they're a contender. I think it's clear they'll make the playoffs, and I think it's clear that nobody can summarily dismiss Arizona because of the potency of personnel that they have and what they're capable of doing.
I would say this. Let's get to your definition of contender. I agree with you. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to win a championship, of course, but that you will contend for one, not pretend. Right now, they look like they have the personnel. There's no doubt about it. Speedy receivers, sure-handed receivers, a top-flight kind of potentially breakout running back, a quarterback who puts up big numbers, a great defense. Like, they have the personnel, absolutely. But are they actually contenders? The Panthers thumped them in a way that tells me that's not a contender. That wasn't a close game. That wasn't tight. They squeak by Green Bay and they get thumped by the eventual NFC winners, but not the Super Bowl winners. And then follow that up with a loss to a totally depleted team. Is that a team, after the way Carson Palmer looked under the bright lights, that I believe can actually contend for a Super Bowl, or rather make the playoffs and lose to someone before the NFC Championship game? I think the latter.
There are plenty of teams. There are plenty of teams who got annihilated in an NFC Championship game over the years and were contenders. Nobody's sitting here and saying that the Arizona Cardinals should be the favorites to win the Super Bowl. But we were talking about them in preseason prognostications for a reason, because we know that they have the personnel to legitimately compete. And again, when you think about a team, think about what happened in Seattle in the first half against Carolina. All right, they got ramrodded, but ultimately lost that game. Now, Arizona got destroyed, and we get that 49-15 in the NFC Championship game. They didn't show up. All I'm saying to you, however, is this. A contender is, to me, a top 4 or 5 team in the NFL. And I think Arizona is one of those teams.
Yeah,
Molly thinks they're the best.
Yeah, go Bird Gang. Coming up next, though, we are switching gears here to the Vikings. The defense carried the team to victory in Week 1. Will we see Sam Bradford in Week 2? We'll tell you that after the break. The question is, who will be the Vikings starting quarterback in Week 2? Head coach Mike Zimmer said Monday he hasn't decided who will start against the Packers on Sunday night and isn't in any rush to choose a starter. Sean Hill played well enough in a win against the Titans on Sunday, but Minnesota did trade a first-round pick for Sam Bradford. Max, what does that say about Bradford?
It says he's been there for a week and a half, and it's an NFL offense. I don't care how easy it is. Oh, you're going to give the ball to Adrian Peterson. When they stack the box, it's not that easy, as we just saw. They have a great defense. Oh, you're familiar with this? No. He just got to the team. He was not in camp with him, nothing like that. It's going to take a minute for him to learn the offense. I said by Week 3 he's going to start. But that doesn't mean anything if he doesn't start Week 2. Stephen A., you know who Sam Bradford could be on the Vikings? It's possible that he's Jim Plunkett with the Raiders. I mean, it's possible. Both drafted #1 overall. Both won the Heisman Trophy. Both did kind of midland success, maybe below average, with the first team with which they played. Both had a stopover on another team briefly, and both wound up on teams with excellent defenses that appeared ready to win. Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls and a Super Bowl MVP. Bradford's in a very good situation. Just because he's not starting Week 2, I don't think there's that much to read into, other than it's an NFL team. You got to learn what the hell is going on there before you start.
Well, first of all, I would like to applaud you for connecting with our resident researcher, David Sabino, who's absolutely exceptional. I mean, it just shows your brilliance, Max Kellerman, to bring up some quarterback that was drafted #1 overall 45 years ago to make the comparison to Sam Bradford. I'm so touched. I mean, I learned something new every day from you. Congratulations with that.
When
but
David,
here's the reality,
when Sabino doesn't two-time me with you, I win every argument. Go ahead.
Actually, then that explains why you think you win every argument
whatever it
when
is.
you've lost every
No, I
argument. Because I rarely use David Sabino because I don't need him as much as you do, but I love him,
you need
and
him
he
more than you
definitely
think.
edifies my mind, and I appreciate him. But here's the deal, Max Kellerman. Here's what it comes down to. This is so weak on the part of Coach Mike Zimmer. It's pretty damn pathetic. You hid your quarterback in game 1 against the Tennessee Titans. You couldn't generate anything offensively. They stacked the box and made sure Adrian Peterson couldn't do anything and dared Shaun Hill to throw the football. This is the Tennessee Titans that we're talking about, who were up 10-0 at halftime before they had a meltdown because they turned over the ball 3 times in a span of 7 minutes, giving up 2 touchdowns along the way, a pick 6 by Mariota, and then a fumble that was returned for a touchdown. That's how the Minnesota Vikings were scoring points on this particular day. Their offense was anemic. It wasn't that impressive. Shaun Hill ain't the dude. Everybody in their grandmama knows it. And Zimmer doing everything that he can to sit up there and fool or to make people second guess who's going to be the quarterback for his team shows how much lack of faith he has in his offense. Just man up. It's your guys against our guys. It's my coaching against your coaching. It's mano y mano. Let's handle our business. That's the kind of confidence a coach should be displaying in his team instead of hiding who his quarterback's going to be until the very last minute because he wants to sit up there and make you wonder who you have to prepare for. It's just weak as weak comes. That's not what this is about.
This is not that complicated. The guy got there.
Give Sam Bradford the job. Give Sam Bradford the job.
Shaun
Hill ain't no damn quarterback. Give Sam Bradford, knowing 20% of the offense is better than Shaun Hill. Give him the damn ball.
Let me get this straight.
And let him go. Listen, let me tell you. Listen. What did I just say? I didn't stutter. I said 20% of Sam Bradford is better than Shaun Hill.
Let me get this straight.
Has
Sam Bradford had an injury history in the NFL? That's hampered his career?
Yes.
Yes, he has. You want him to get to a new team, new system, etc., and then expose him before he knows the playbook, before he knows his teammates. Expose him to harm's way when you have him under contract for 2 years and you just traded him.
When he first arrived, hold on.
Draft picks for him?
When he first arrived in Minnesota the other day, Pat Schumer is a guy that worked with him in both St. Louis and Philadelphia. I specifically highlighted that familiarity, which obviously assisted in Minnesota being interested in getting Sam Bradford to Minnesota to begin with. So you've got Kyle Rudolph, you've got Laquan Treadwell, you've got Stephon Diggs, you've got the best runner in football, and what we both agree is a pretty solid offensive line. And you're trying to tell me that you want to sit here in week 2. He's been there a week, and you want to second guess or make people believe you're wondering whether or not Sam Bradford can be there because of Shaun Hill?
Shaun Hill? Nothing to do with Shaun Hill.
You might play quarterback better than Shaun Hill.
That for sure not.
Come on.
This has nothing to do with Shaun Hill. This has to do with the size of the investment they've made in Sam Bradford, the belief that he can compensate for the loss of Teddy Bridgewater, which may be a 2-year absence. Luckily, one of the reasons they traded for Bradford, as you pointed out a couple days ago, that because he's under contract for 2 years, Sam Bradford's expensive over that time, both in terms of what you pay him and what you gave up for him. You believe you're poised to win. It's not that you don't think. You're not sure that he's ready yet, that he knows the team well enough and the playbook well enough yet, Sam Bradford, to take over. So you might wait an extra week. And that's a problem because you don't want to sacrifice him on the altar of winning game 2 of the season when you plan on winning for the next 2 years?
Listen. I think everybody's insulting the intelligence of Sam Bradford. We question Sam Bradford's durability. That's true. We question, does he have that it factor to be a winner? Yes, but we don't question his ability to throw the football. We don't question, whether or not it's going to, his intelligence in terms of comprehending the playbook. I mean, my God, Shaun Hill is the quarterback. Shaun Hill.
Here, Sam, go learn all your teammates. Go learn the whole playbook and all your teammates in a week and a half. No preseason, no practice, no nothing.
Enough from you two. We want to hear from our first take fan. Jerry Rice is considered the greatest receiver of all time, while Joe Montana in the conversation for greatest quarterback of all time. But are they the greatest quarterback-wide receiver combo? Your results next. We'll react.
First Take is brought to you by Cricket Wireless, something to smile about. And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty stands with you.
asked you earlier in the show, which is the best quarterback wide receiver duo of all time? The results are in. Montana Rice with 42%, Brady Moss with 28%, Big Ben Brown with 16%, and Manning and Harrison with 14%. Fellas, what you think about that?
They got it just right in my order. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh.
I'm glad that I could educate the public, Stephen A.
Well, listen, I mean, it's hard to argue against Brady and Randy Moss. I certainly will concede that. But I think the 3-year run that AB and Big Ben Roethlisberger have been on is something that I haven't seen. And I think that right now Antonio Brown is just on another stratosphere.
Yeah.
And I've never seen that on that level before. We've seen Randy Moss, yes, but we haven't seen the combo of a quarterback, wide receiver hooking up to this degree in NFL
because
history.
Tom Brady,
375 receptions in 3 years.
Because who's Tom Brady after all?
Yeah.
I mean, Brady and Moss had 23 touchdowns one season. 23 TDs one season.
How long do you need to see Antonio Brown do it for before he's in
Well, he's not going for peak. He's going for career. That's Montana Rice. They got to double what they've done to really talk about Montana and Rice.
Stephen A.
Double it.
Okay.
If you're missing Max and I after the show, we're going to be on Facebook Live answering all the fans' questions. If you want to jump on, if you have any questions for us, anything you want to throw at us, we'll be there. We know you're big on Facebook.
I guess my response is I'm proud of both of y'all for working after 12 noon. I appreciate it. Y'all got it good.
Really? What'd he do over the weekend? What'd this guy do over the weekend?
That's true.
What's he doing this next weekend?
Well, you know, he does do boxing. He's the best.
This is just his day job.
He's the best.
Now, as for me,
and by the way, I apologize that we
working.
haven't talked about Triple G yet.
Tomorrow?
Yes.
Should we talk about it tomorrow?
Triple
G tomorrow.
I have a lot of questions why they stopped it. I got a lot of things for you, Max. More First Take tomorrow. Stay tuned.